is the hat he wears every day.
Thank you, Dr. Benlin. Unfortunately, she got my name wrong. My name is Bonnie Nutkinson. The one who owns this hat. And thank you, everyone. I think I'll take this off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let them see them. Okay, so thank you for being here again. Hope you enjoyed the morning session, your lunch break, and we've got an exciting afternoon session for you. So I'm here to just very briefly give you a sense of the Alzheimer's program, which has been in existence for many years. So maybe the next slide. I think, Cheryl, you're moving the slides for me? Okay, thank you. So some data. You heard it from Dean Golden this morning. We have over 6 million Americans with Alzheimer's disease. And unless we find effective treatments or some prevention strategies, we'll have over 14 million Americans by 2050 who will be afflicted by this disease. But I think there's a lot of optimism. You heard from Dr. Zetterberg, and a lot of really breakthrough advances taking place in the field of diagnosis, preclinical diagnosis, and some effective treatments. In Wisconsin, 120,000 people have the disease, and in 3 years, it'll go to 130,000 people. And as a state, we spend substantial amounts of funds to take care of them. In fact, Medicare alone spends about $24,000 per person in Wisconsin with dementia to take care of them. It is the 7th leading cause of death. It used to be 6, but COVID, believe it or not, has taken over Alzheimer's as the 6th leading cause of death. So Alzheimer's is the 7th leading cause of death in the US. Next slide, please. So we are very, very fortunate to be one of the 33 NIH-funded centers of excellence in Alzheimer's research in the United States. There are a total of 37. The other 4 they had the preliminary grant from the NIH to help them mature into a large center. So we are one of the 33, the only one in Wisconsin, and we were actually funded in 2009. Next slide, please. So our center was funded in 2009, so we have been in existence for the last 14th year of funding, and we have over 40 investigators who are linked with the ADRC. They're spread all over the campus, and they have all kinds of expertise. So this is really, truly a multidisciplinary team that examines whole spectrum of Alzheimer's, from molecular biology to translational research, to animal research, to patient research, to community-based research, and then finally dissemination of all the findings that we have here. This ADRC is currently supporting almost 60 clinical studies, and we have over 100 to 150 collaborations worldwide at any time, and these collaborations are highly productive. And once again, in terms of research, we have, in the next slide, you'll see almost 1,100 participants just in the ADRC alone. And the RAP study, you heard from Dr. Zetterberg, has almost another 1,700. So between the two centers, the ADRC and the RAP study, we have over 2,100 or so well-characterized participants who have been followed for anywhere between 10 to 20 years. So they've been providing prospective data to us, all kinds of data, right from cognition to imaging to biomarkers to medical data and also social determinants of health. So as you can see, this is one of the very unique centers where we target the disease across the full spectrum, and we have expertise in all aspects of that disease, of research in the aspects of those aspects of Alzheimer's. And also, we do a lot of educational events, and we are training the next generation of scientists here at Wisconsin and nationally. So it's a very active center in multiple ways. Next slide, please. We are in the final year of funding for this grant cycle, and we're going for renewal in June, and hopefully we'll make it for another 5 years. But in the last year of funding, we were very fortunate to get 10 new grants, and in fact, those grants amounted to almost $130 million just in 1 year. So once again, it's a testament of the quality of research that goes on here. We have trained a number of 88 trainees which are affiliated just with the REC program, which is the research education component, the training aspect, the training program in the ADRC that Dr. Barb Menlin leads. And we are one of the few centers who have a large number of participants from underrepresented groups, African American, Native American, and hopefully in the new cycle we'll have more Hispanics and also rural participants and some veterans as well. Dr. Carrie Gleason, Dr. Edwards, the both are here. Get a chance, please talk to them. And whole of their teams have helped us recruit hundreds of African Americans. In fact, the total is almost 300 African Americans and over 80 Native Americans to be part of the center, and they've been providing prospective data over the years. And as you know, there's a significant effect of race and ethnicity on risk and progression and presentations of Alzheimer's. So we need to really understand how this disease differs between races and ethnicities. And our center is one of the few who is studying that, and hopefully we'll be able to publish some breakthrough findings in that area. Also, we have a large brain bank. We collect about 66% of our participants have provided a consent for brain autopsy. And thus far, we have had 110 deaths, and our autopsy rate is almost 60%. So that's really quite commendable based on the national data. A number of people have given all kinds of biomarker data, MR imaging, just some of those biomarkers are here. Over 80% of participants have provided us prospective MRI scanning. About 55% have provided CSF samples, and another 53% who have given both MR and CSF samples. And we have all kinds of data, cognitive data, DNA, blood samples, you name it. We have large repository of data of all kinds that we share worldwide, not just locally or nationally. Next slide, please. Okay. And another major mission of the ADRC, which will continue into the next funding cycle, is the blood-based AD program, biomarkers program. Dr. Zetterberg, we thank him profusely for helping us establish that program. Dr. Johnson, Dr. Zetterberg, Dr. Carlson, Dr. Benlin, a number of investigators are involved with the blood-based Alzheimer's biomarkers program. And in the next cycle, 5 years of funding from NIH, we really want to expand this program, and we'll be doing a number of local assays for various core Alzheimer's biomarkers. They'll be done, the assays will be done here locally. We also have a Roche lab which performs CSF biomarker assays. So between the Roche and the blood-based Alzheimer's lab, we'll be able to do these assays locally here at UW-Madison. And also a sincere thank to the institution. You heard from the dean today. We have substantial institutional support for the Alzheimer's program. And in the next year, we'll get access to over 13,000 square foot of space, office space, research space. And this is really rare at UW-Madison. Space is very, very precious. And for the university to give this amount of space to the Alzheimer's program just signifies how important the institution thinks this aspect of research is for us, and no brainer. It is one of the most devastating diseases known to afflict human beings. So obviously, UW-Madison wants to be a leader and is a leader in that area of research. So multiple commitments from the institution, including hard cash that they'll give us to enhance research locally. Next slide, please. I think I've got 2 or 3 minutes left, and here are some announcements. A number of our faculty have gotten awards. Dr. Fabu Carter, who works with Dr. Carrie Gleason and the group, received the Newbridge 2022 Champion Champion Hope Award. Dr. Anita Bhattacharya just received the Wireless Faculty Early Career Investigator Award. Dr. Ozioma Okonkwo was selected by the NIA and the Alzheimer's Association to be a member of the Alzheimer's work group. Dr. Nate Chen just created a toolkit for clinicians to diagnose and to detect and diagnose Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Johnson received the prestigious Wireless Distinguished Achievement Award from UW-Madison, and I don't know how the last guy got into the NIA Council. So I'm very fortunate to be a member of the NIA Council, and we'll be able to. And thank you. Next slide, please. And we have awarded a number of developmental projects to some very talented investigator. These projects, they give about $40,000 each year for 2 years, so they get about $80,000 to do an innovative project which will advance the Alzheimer's research locally. Next slide, please. And also the Rex scholars. These are the two new Rex scholars who were mentored by Dr. Benlin and her team and the other ADRC investigators. And Dr. Maria Mora Pinzon is a new recruit who's focusing on health disparity, especially the Hispanic population. And we're hoping that over time we'll be able to expand the number of Hispanics who are a part of Alzheimer's program here at UW-Madison. Next slide, please. And Dr. Nate Chin, you probably have heard. Anyone who doesn't know who Dr. Chin is? He is a nationally renowned investigator and also creator of the podcast. This is the most listened to podcast worldwide. He has over 110 episodes on different aspects of Alzheimer's disease. They are available on the net and multiple internet and multiple other social media outlets. These podcasts have been listened to in every state in the country and across 110 countries worldwide. So you can imagine people listen to these podcasts globally. And thanks to Dr. Chen and many other things that he does along with the podcasts. This may be the last slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so that is my last slide. So it's a real pleasure to invite and introduce our next speaker, Dr. Crystal Glover. Dr. Glover is an applied social psychologist, a mixed methodologist, and health equity and aging researcher at the Rush Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. She is also an associate professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences and neurological sciences at the Rush Medical School. She leads the Outreach, Recruitment, and Engagement Core, or the OR Core of the Rush ADRC, and our area of interest, research interest, is in health equity and disparities. She focuses on understanding and facilitating cognitive and healthy aging across all demographic groups, with a special concentration on members of African American, Black and Hispanic and Latino communities. Dr. Glover dedicates her work to eradicating health disparities and also creating health equity globally, nationally, and locally. It's truly a pleasure to invite Dr. Glover to make a presentation. Crystal, thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Asthana, for the great introduction. Thank you, Dr. Benlin, for inviting me, and Cheryl, for all of your help in the upcoming weeks to today. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I'm so glad to be with you, so to speak about research from a recently published paper of mine that's focused on these diverse participant perspectives and how we can go on to create resultant strategies that we can incorporate to advance dementia biomarker research. So today, I'll give you a snapshot of how I kind of phase things or put things in phases. So first, we'll start off with how I generally couch my research. And that's really speaking about a most critical issue, but also the consequences of those issues, and of course, ways forward. And then I'll spotlight a case study, if you will, of what we call PET qualitative at my center, the Rush Alzheimer's Disease Center, and how we're able to have recommendations and next steps. And then we'll focus on your thoughts and questions, which is arguably my favorite part of the presentation. So my work centers around two most critical issues, and one being the severe underinclusion, and I argue inequitable inclusion and underrepresentation of most demographic groups of older adults within our work in aging and ADRD. But I really hone in on that of Black and Latino adults being severely underincluded, especially as they are at higher risk, arguably, for being affected by ADRD, developing ADRD, and also being caregivers of those living with ADRD or dementia. So not being able to have these individuals in the study or in our work, I deem as a most critical issue that plagues our field overall. So the consequences that we have here is the largest piece, is that we have limited availability, not only of biomarkers and other data, but also an understanding of ADRD within these communities and beyond. So what does that mean? We're unable to say, identify issues in ADRD. What are potential treatments, solutions? That goes past, say, pharmaceutical, so the applicability, generalizability of what we already have, Is it safe, efficacious for these different communities, all the way to preventive methods? My work speaks a lot about what I call the 3 acts: social, physical, and cognitive activity. But if folks aren't participating in the work, if we're not doing a good job of inviting individuals in, how do we know that these things are relevant? How we're speaking about these different activities? Do they resonate? Are they scientifically and culturally relevant? And then something that's even more near and dear is educational materials and outreach efforts. We may not know, say, how we're pitching aging and ADRD research, how we're speaking about the disease. Is it relevant to these different communities? Are we speaking in a way that resonates to them? And ultimately, are we able to start to finish, so with the research design, to be able to say we're having equitable study design? So overall, without this equitable inclusion, we have a severely limited understanding of ADRD within Black and Latino communities, I argue specifically, but demographic groups overall. So something that I postulate as 2 ways forward is both demographic and methodological diversity. So as a mixed methodologist and applied social psychologist, I think of these 2 intertwined ways. So first, we need to have social cognitive processes, or the ways that people, say, assess a situation based on their attitudes, beliefs, but also the situation, and then be able to make decisions. So that's really understanding in a high fidelity way, a rigorous way, participant perspectives, but not only understanding them, but centering them and incorporating them into the research question, outreach, recruitment, engagement efforts, retaining or sustaining participation, and also result interpretation, the interpretation of our data. But in order to do that, I argue that we need more in terms of our methodological approaches. So expanding beyond, say, what we term as the gold standard as quantitative research assessment. So I really bring these 2 things into action. So how can we address the most critical issue of under-inclusion and equitable inclusion, but also being able to expand our rigor in other methodologies? So I saw the perfect chance to do this was at the Rush Alzheimer's Disease Center. We were looking to offer PET brain scan as a part of all of our cohorts. So this is something that we had not been doing. And I thought to myself, well, this is a good time to get in from the ground up. How can we, say, develop our research studies, develop how we may approach outreach, engage our educational materials, recruit for PET brain scans, specifically among particular groups at the RADC? No other way than to have a qualitative examination of their perspectives on this type of test. So of course, the purpose of the work was to enact, say, equitable study design, but specifically I wanted to assess not only the barriers, so participant identified barriers, but how can we have elements of educational materials, outreach strategies, engagement approaches, recruitment, et cetera, that's effective and culturally compatible, where we can incorporate participant perspectives, center them, and then design an equitable way forward from the beginning, not merely, say, tacking it on, but building it from the ground up. So the ultimate goal here was to have almost a co-design of participant perspectives and understanding how we may speak about PET brain scan, what are related barriers, and what are related ways forward, really looking to extend our field in terms of aging and ADRD research. So our participants were from 2 longitudinal ongoing studies at the RADC. One focused exclusively on older Black adults, our clinical core, and the other focused exclusively on Latino adults, so our Latino core. So these are our eligibility criteria here. I put them here just so we can kind of maybe have questions about them later on. But to be brief, is 60 years of older, self-identified as non-Latino Black, and Latino, proficient in English. And then I used a random purposeful sampling to be able to understand who to select. So shortly, that means that it's one of 2 things: folks that are either highly opinionated, or we may think as opinionated about a topic, or individuals that may really want to get their perspective out there to be able to say, this is what I think the RADC should be doing in terms of PET brain scan, and this is how we can go forward. And it really required me to work closely with not only the PIs of these studies, but also the study staff in order to say, who should we select? So we did conduct one-time semi-structured in-depth individual interviews. That just means that each person took part in one interview, semi-structured. We had an interview guide that was able to really lead our discussion, but the participant guided it. So that means we went in with, what would we like to know? Where are folks at in terms of their baseline knowledge? What's information that they may need to make a cursory decision or to go back and speak with others about PET brain scan? And then to say, well, who are your trusted sources of information? How can we think about give back? Something we're always thinking about at the RADC is how to adequately give back in terms of research participation. So hearing here from participants or potential folks about what would be a best practice in terms of a give back. And then we just had open space for us to discuss, what are you thinking about PET brain scan? What are some questions that we may answer? And is there anything else that you would like to discuss with us today? So all of these things were audio recorded, of course, and transcribed because that's the data. So I know this is a lot here. I simply put this so just for full transparency, I'm a big fan of rigorous, high fidelity, well-grounded qualitative research. But the big take-home message is that we conducted analyses in two big phases. The first phase was just across all participants. So it didn't matter if they were an older Black adult, an older Latino, all data, all transcripts were put together. So I really wanted to see what were the basic themes that were coming out from everybody. How can we go about outreach, recruitment, sustainability, and also building strategies forward? So that was really the big gist of phase one. But for phase two, I wanted to see how the groups differed and how they were unique. So I wanted to see how the basic themes of phase one were really able to break down in terms of the two groups, older Black and Latino adults, but then also if there were any unique patterns that I may see within each group. So here's a little bit on participant characteristics. Arguably, largely up front, women were most of our participants, highly educated group, but we have to start someplace. So we have phase one, which means that we're looking across data of all groups, okay? So we have 4 themes here, and they kind of tell a story. So they build upon each other, but they're interwoven together. So these 4 themes speak across older Black and older Latino adults about how they're thinking about PET brain scan or their perceptions. So the first one is around knowledge limitations. We did notice that there's very little knowledge or understanding about PET brain scan within these individuals. So the pre-existing knowledge is very, very cursory. So those individuals that did have some knowledge, it was largely due to family members who were either healthcare providers, or maybe they had, say, an oncology appointment, or if they broke a bone, they were able to say, oh, I remember PET from this sort of instance. But typically it was either personal experience non-related to aging and ADRD, or a family member who's a healthcare provider. But that caused a lot of confusion, say, is it an MRI? Is it a CAT scan? But then also, since it's related to the brain, is it brain donation? Am I donating while I'm still alive? And also, more importantly, is this brain surgery? So folks really wanted to know, okay, this is my limited knowledge, but what is it exactly? So that led to what I call really the centerpiece of this work here, what I call PPO. This is what everyone wanted to know, the requirements for consent. What's the purpose? What's the process? What's the outcome? So they want to know, what is PET, but what is it not? So if it's not brain donation, then what is it? And then if you're asking me to do this, how is it related to aging, brain health, and more importantly, dementia? So what are you looking to do with these data, do with this type of imaging at the center, but also what's going on in the field and why is this important? But then logistically, they wanted to know the process. What should I do before? Do I need to prepare in a certain way? Do I need a ride there? How long will it take? What happens while I'm there? Everything from getting to, say, my car, to the scanner, to how do I prepare and really calm myself while I'm in, to afterward, really highlighting the role of potential side effects and any associated risks based on comorbidities that they may already have. And then lastly, they want to know the outcome. 2 big things stood out. One, Am I going to receive my results? And is someone going to help me understand them? What is it telling me? And then what are y'all learning from my results? What are researchers going to learn from my scan and scans of individuals like me? So here, that leads to the motivators, say, of participation. Without a doubt, it was being driven by receiving their PET brain scan results. They want to know what's going on with their brains. They want to share it with their family. And by far, that was the primary facilitator. But in order for them to take part, they were really focused on what we had in the previous slide, the PPO, the purpose, the process, the outcome. Tell me what it's for, how we're going to do it, and what are we going to get from it. Of course, altruism is there. It's generally a piece with most of our participants here at the RADC, and we've published on this. But that also, just because they had great research experiences with us and they really connect with Dr. Barnes, Dr. Arfanakis, myself, and others, they said it just cannot go forward without numbers 1 and 2. But sort of very low on the list, if 1 and 2 are the top 2 priorities, financial incentives were distant third there, whereas something nice, but not necessarily required. And we'll talk a little bit about between group differences within that financial incentives in a moment. And then theme 4, lastly, is who to involve. So people really wanted their scan results so they could say, hey, I want to speak with my family members about what I'm seeing. But also, I would like to speak to my peers, like, have you taken part in a PET brain scan? And also my healthcare providers. Is this something that's wise for me to take part in, especially considering any comorbidities? And do you think that it will add to my understanding of my own health and as well as my brain health? So knowing those big waves, those big themes, I wanted to break down and see if there were between group differences there to say, you know, how these different groups maybe think about things a little differently, or how they may approach, or how we may have strategies that are unique to them. So for the sake of time, I'm highlighting the 2 big themes, these requirements for consent and motivators for consent. For Latino older adults, they said, hey, just give me the general PPO. Why are we doing this? What does it entail? And why? What do we have as an outcome? But for older Black adults, it was like, I want to see a simulation. Can I see the equipment? Will I be able to fit in there? And also, is there someone like me, an older adult, that took part in this before that I can get their perspective on, their experience? So they wanted more in-depth details, whereas older Latinos we were like the broad stroke, but then we can move forward. But then also something we noticed slightly different was around the motivators. So while the scan results and understanding the purpose, process, outcome were highly important for everybody, that's just without a doubt. Once we talked about financial incentives, Latino older adults said, you know, compensation would be nice, it's appreciated, but not necessarily expected. Whereas we heard from older Black adults that are saying, this is a reciprocal act. If I'm taking part in research, I'm providing data, you're furthering the field, say by analyzing and then, you know, moving forward with it. I assume that I'm going to be compensated for this financially. So there's a piece of an expectation by older Black adults and then an appreciation by older Latinos, but noting that this was way down the line compared to receiving scan results, as well as understanding that purpose, process, and outcomes. So we did notice a few unique or emphasized patterns, so things that maybe not necessarily spoke to the themes per se, but something that kept coming up in conversation in terms of PET brain scan research, as well as just research participation overall. So for older Black adults, these individuals spoke of the importance of research, especially in addressing issues of aging, including ADRD, particularly in Black communities. So if we think all the way back to the beginning of the presentation where I said the consequences of inequitable inclusion, underrepresentation, is that we have a limited understanding. It really seems like older Black adults are on the same page as us. They think through research participation, we will get to strategies and solutions to address aging overall, any issues, but in particular ADRD, and that this is important for Black individuals to take part in. But they also spoke of We're here at the RADC because we have trust in the center as well as the faculty and the staff. But on the other side, they really wanted the scan results. So it's almost like a funnel. Like, we must participate. I trust you. It's really specific to the RADC. But also, if I get the scan results, I feel a little afraid by what it will tell me. And then how, even furthermore, will I then address what it's telling me? So will it say that I'm having an issue with my brain? Will I require surgery? And if so, I really don't want to take part in that. So it's very much a process of research participation in PET brain scan from consent. So I'm open to it. I participate, but what are we going to find? So very complex. Within Latinos, we saw the centering of family throughout the PET brain scan process. So from should I take part in this, to say consenting, to sharing my scan results, to discussing that with them, and then saying, ultimately, I'm doing this to benefit them. So from contemplation to consent, possible participation, and then discussion of all of these things at each step with their loved ones was the centerpiece for older Latinos. So in the manuscript, we set forth several recommendations that I would like to share here with y'all. So first is the creation and the delivery, of course, of written educational materials. So these, of course, printed documents, et cetera, but they have to address the three big things: the purpose, the process, and the outcome. But not only that, what is the role of PET brain scan at your center and to the field overall? So they want to know, what are they contributing, say locally, but also overall, and how will it benefit themselves, loved ones, and others like them? And so it's also important to say what it is, but also something to say what it is not. But it's key to have these written materials so people can read, reflect, have as a reference, but you have to follow up these written materials with a verbal discussion, whether that's just with the potential participant or if they would like loved ones to be there. You have to have space to say discuss and answer questions, preferably with a medical doctor or healthcare provider affiliated with the study. And it goes without saying that all correspondence, written materials must be in the language of comfort and compatibility for the person and their family. So some things that we're considering here at the RADC as we've been ramping up to conduct PET brain scan was information infusion. So how much is too much? When to say incorporate what information. So really thinking about how can we have different pieces of information most relevant at different parts of the engagement process, the education process, and ultimately consent and participation. The role and how much for financial incentives, making sure we give back, and then speak about the PET brain scan results. So you can't just give them back, but you need to be able to interpret them for individuals, and who to involve and when. So we were able to put this work into practice at the RADC late last year, to be precise. So I believe since October, we've been able to have 32 PET brain scans with older Black and Latino adults. We have 2 in the pipeline for this week. So our goal to at least start with this pilot piece is about 56. And I think we'll make it with the educational materials that we built based on the qualitative work, the financial incentive, which is $100, and then also the involvement of loved ones and healthcare providers, and of course, providing the scan results. So I really thought how I really was conceptualizing this work was, how can we embed equity throughout the research process, especially for biomarker research? And right here at the bottom, that's where I live as a methodologist, designing and conducting equitable research and prevention trials, but also thinking about the implications of the biomarker work that we do, say from the ethical and economic considerations, to also perspectives around disclosure and receiving those disclosures, but even further of making sure that all demographically diverse groups, everyone is included in the work that we're looking to really impact ADRD for the future. So I'll wrap up by acknowledging, of course, community members engaged in research, all of my colleagues and staff at the RADC and NIA and Alzheimer's Association. So I look forward to your thoughts and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Glover, for that wonderful presentation and so important for us here doing biomarker research. So thank you for sharing all of that. We'll now take questions. We're monitoring the Q&A if you're joining us via live stream. And if you're here in the audience, please raise your hand and we will bring you a microphone. I perhaps could get started with the first question. So Dr. Glover, I thought that was really interesting that some of your research participants expressed wanting to speak to other research participants that have undergone these procedures. So I'm wondering if that's something that you've considered implementing at your at the RADC. So for example, even like perhaps hiring a research participant who would speak with new participants.
Well, that is a great idea about hiring individuals to do just that. But I think we're in the very beginning stages of how do we approach that? To say, so we have 32 individuals now, but looking to say, can those folks, will they like to write a testimony or be able to share their perspective? So as a part of our ADC, we do have what we call higher order research activities. So folks are invited to share a research experience, perspective, et cetera. So we were thinking about having those individuals say, how can you share what you went through? What was the process of it before, during, after? And how did you feel? How did you feel going into it now on the other side? And what are some suggestions that you may give someone who's considering consenting to PET brain scan? So that sort of is on the radar, but in terms of perspective sharing versus, say, having someone that's always on call, if you will, to share that, because I do think it's very specific in terms of when they say a peer, really thinking through who do they want to hear from. So really wanting to have those diverse perspectives, even in sharing their experiences.
Thank you. We have a question over here at the front. And please state your name and then your question.
Yeah, my name is Catherine Gallagher. And my question is, so Nathan Chin and others here have been studying how people feel in receiving results of some of their research-derived measures like PET scans. And I'm wondering if you can reflect upon how your populations feel about that.
I definitely think it's something that's great. I'm so glad to hear that. And I believe Nate and I have spoken about that. It is a piece of, I'm getting something out of this, as something I can take back to my family and also that I could take to my healthcare providers. But I do think it's a little bit nebulous as to then what do I do with this? So I have this, but then what are the next steps? I think that is where research can really step in to say, okay, this is what we have, this is what I'm finding, but how can I then go on to say, even foster brain health? How can I share this with my family in a truly accurate way? So I think the next step is a little bit harder. You get it, and then what? So I think that's where we are with it. So providing it, they're happy about it, they want to know, but then what does this mean long-term, and are there actions I need to take right now? And that's where the healthcare providers come in.
Another one over here.
Hi, my name is Janet. I'm a first-year graduate student at the Neuroscience Public Policy program. First, I wanted to say I'm embarking on a qualitative methods research. So after seeing your talk, I'm very excited to do this work. So my question is actually, in the methods portion, the eligibility was one point is to have like high English proficiency. And I am curious if you intend to do another study that involves people of different English proficiencies as well.
Yeah, that's a huge, thank you, Janet, for that question. That's a huge limitation of our work. And it was really all due to resources, and then also what we did during the pandemic. So being able to do this work during the pandemic and with very limited resources. So the answer is yes, because I really would like to know, and I think the field would benefit from individuals who are proficient in Spanish, prefer Spanish, and also more comfortable in Spanish to say, are there differences, even with older Latinos who are English proficient and prefer to converse that way? What are some things that we are missing? And is it, say, the same as including family there, who to include, et cetera? So yes, the answer is definitely to have those perspectives and that representation there. So for sure, this is just, say, scratching the tip of the iceberg.
Hello, Dr. Clover. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for your inspirational presentation. And I do have a question regarding the incentive, or to be more specific, a deliberate compensation discrimination sometimes between the test group and the control group. Have you ever been involved in a case where the control group might be exposed to slightly more danger due to, let's say, drug usage, or they need to spend more time? And in that case, how would you allocate the incentives to the control group and to the test group? And for information, I have seen a study on my own that the test group had to spend about 60 times 60 times more of their own time working on their assignments compared to the control group. But in the end of the study, they were given the same amount of compensation, and for the test group members, they didn't feel they were properly respected. And for the control group, if you choose to give them a significantly less amount, they will feel the same way. Oh, we're not respected. I thought we're in the same study. So how would you deal with that?
Yeah, that is a great question, actually. And so I'll take it back a little bit, because this is even beyond the work that I spoke about here today, is that I think the ADRCs are all over the place in terms of compensation, incentive, et cetera. So I am now a part of a work group that's all about guidelines for that, convened by NIA, and we'll be debuting our guidelines and suggestions at the spring ADRC meeting. So we'll have just that about when to compensate, what are incentives, what's payment for time, and how to consider control versus intervention groups. So that'll be coming out. We have a meeting tomorrow to solidify. So I hesitate to say just exactly, because we're kind of feeling our way, but we're setting up those guidelines, or setting forth those guidelines in the very near future about equitable incentivization in ADRC and other work. So yeah, that should be coming, because it's something, I'm seeing that folks are not even providing incentives, and then it varies largely, and then it varies within a study or based on procedure. So say even here, we try to keep it standardized for, say, qualitative, PET brain scan, et cetera, but it is kind of new terrain. So we'll be setting that forth soon. So that's a great and timely question. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more question from the live stream.
Well, actually, it's a question from me. I do want to welcome the 50-some people who are live streaming, and encourage you to drop a question in the chat for our next speaker. I apologize if I missed this, Dr. Glover, but how did you come up with the themes for your focus groups?
Oh yeah, so they were on the slide for the analyses. So we took more of a grounded theory, but I would say grounded theory inspired, because it's not truly that, but it was inspired, and say we were able to say first, all of us, so there were 3 of us, we put all the transcripts together like in a binder, and each separately went through each transcript and just read them for familiarity, or to refamiliarize ourselves. So just almost like you're reading a book. And then we went back and said, let's highlight, say, key passages, things that stick out. Then we were able to say, let's provide codes or key short descriptions of each passage. Then we went back and grouped each of the codes together to create like small sub-themes. So almost say a bit of data to say, so one person data, then you may have I'm trying to describe it quantitatively, but if you have, say, one score, and then you would put the total together for a subcomponent, and then you put the whole scale together. So that's the code, sub-theme, theme. And then at each step, we're talking to say, you know, what do you agree with? What don't you agree with? So we reach consensus at each step between the three of us analysts. And then we agree upon the themes of what we're seeing that address the research question. And then we do the whole thing all over again with more constant comparative coding, where we're contrasting each of the codes, sub-themes, and themes based on or stratified by race and ethnicity. So overall, it took us about 4 months to analyze these data, you know, going forth and really reaching consensus and settling any conflicts or challenges. So I can share even more of that process that's in the manuscript and also in our standard operating procedures, so you can see that as well. Yeah.
All right, Dr. Glover, I just want to thank you for this wonderful presentation and for this wonderful discussion. All right, the next activity is to find your raffle tickets. If you still have your half, I'm going to call the first raffle ticket. And we're raffling off some amazing prizes, including books and ADRC swag. So I will pull the first ticket. If you have the winning ticket, you'll come up to the microphone and you'll state your name, who you are, what your role is, if you work on the campus, etc., your research if applicable. Okay, everyone ready? Yeah. Okay, the first number is 3423675. 3423675. Okay, moving on. I know. Yes. After, when you come up, if it's your winning prize, you have to say the number backwards to receive your book. So here we go. It's digits forwards and backwards. Thank you, Dr. Carlson. Okay, 3423792. All right, we have our first winner. Please tell us who you are.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Lindsay Clark. I'm an assistant professor in geriatrics and a neuropsychologist, and I study disclosure of biomarker results back to research participants and cognitive assessment of early cognitive changes associated with Alzheimer's disease.
No. Oh, yeah. She doesn't have to say them backwards. Okay, Dr. Clark, thank you. You may choose a book and a mug, and Dr. Clark is also one of our ADRC rec scholars. So nice to meet you, Dr. Clark.